but it has been very deliberate, as I said earlier. It's been deliberate and intentional, okay, to undermine the excellence and the genius of African Americans, especially.
Hello everyone, welcome to Reflections by Lily. I'm meeting with the guest Diane Hawkins this morning, and I'm super excited to talk about all the different work that she's doing with her local NAACP chapter, as well as talk about all of her different experiences. And we'll be talking a lot about racism today, discrimination and prejudice, a super important conversation of this time. So definitely looking forward to starting this conversation, which is definitely one that we should be talking about more often. So, Diane, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It is indeed a pleasure to be interviewed by you today.
Thank you.
So
It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Okay, right before this, we kind of were just talking a little bit about the way that people of color, specifically Black people, are portrayed in the media and the implications that has. And I know we kind of went through that a little bit, but I kind of just want to bring it back up again because I thought that you made such a great point about obviously the way that we see people on TV and movies and in the media and music is how we're going to start looking at the world, because that's going to be a big influence on our perspective. What do you think about that?
I believe it started a long time ago. It was intentional to portray African Americans and people of color in a very unfavorable light. A picture's worth 1,000 words. Therefore, if you present a picture consistently enough, I believe you program the minds of those that are taking in the visuals. We're programmed by what we see more than what we hear. And so it was intentional due to racism, much out of ignorance. Most people are very ignorant in terms of people of color, who they are, the power that we have, the excellence that we bring and have been bringing for years to the table. History has been distorted. It's a deception. And when you really begin to seek and study, you will find truth. And unfortunately, we just live in a culture that continues to, I won't say continue to believe it, because the truth is surfacing, it's being revealed more and more each day. We see it, it's out in the open. Perfect example was with George Floyd, the picture worth 1,000 words. And so many people who have been complicit over the years with what has been going on all along were shocked by the picture, that this is something that has been going on for years in many different ways, okay? But it's been going on, and they can see the injustice that has been meted out against people of color for years. And I believe what has happened is that it really pierced the moral consciousness of so many. And which is why there's an uprising today, okay? And among people of every walk of life, Black, white, red, yellow, brown, doesn't matter what faith you are ascribed to, there's an uprising against injustice, against evil, against hatred. The spirit of man is rising up against the systems are entrenched in these here United States and basically around the world. But we'll stay here for the moment.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Definitely, people are definitely putting in more of an effort to make a change. And people, I definitely know, I know that a lot of books, books about like race relations and stuff like that started selling really well after George Floyd's death, because a lot of people, especially a lot of like non-people of color, wanted to educate themselves a little bit more.
Exactly.
I think that that his death was a wake-up call of like it really just brought back the movement. Like it brought back this like the Black Lives Matter movement, and uh it really showed everyone, it just kind of showed everyone like this is the reality of what's happening right now.
Right.
And and you know what, this has happened and it just wasn't caught on tape before, but like always when these things are being filmed and like it's posted to the public, it's like it's just another wake up call. But it's like hypothetically we should already care about it without these wake up calls, because say all those other deaths that didn't get videos of, and didn't get pictures and didn't have that video evidence, those kind of are not really
Yeah.
talked about or not really discussed, and they just kind of, not really known to the public. But it's like we should definitely be caring about this issue whether or not it's a highly publicized issue or not, because it doesn't change the fact that it's,
Exactly.
not
Exactly.
happening. And I noticed that like right after his death, a lot of more videos were coming out of all these different incidences of racism.
That have
And
been
it's
going
like,
on.
yeah, it just had been going on this whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't, it's like it shouldn't be now where all of a sudden we're talking about it. Um, because it's like this has been happening. Like we should have
Right.
been caring about this before. And I remember when I first learned about racial profiling, it was when I was in, I think, 8th grade, and I was really shocked to hear they interviewed a bunch of different Black men, and a lot of them were saying, I feel like I can't walk down the street in, like a hoodie or something because
Profiling. Exactly.
I'm gonna get made out to be a thug. I'm gonna get made out to be like, I'm gonna be stereotyped to be like, a thug or a criminal, when in
Hmm.
reality I just want to walk down the street and go to the store. And one thing a man said was, I always feel like I have to be wearing a business suit when I'm going down the street in order to not get profiled.
Right.
And that really that I heard that story like when I was in 8th grade, and it still stuck with me because I was like, could you imagine having to like prove to everyone, like kind of wear an outfit to break a stereotype when it's like they
Yes.
shouldn't even be stereotyping you in the first place?
Couldn't agree with you more. Well, it's like anything else. We've been subliminally seduced by the media. What we see on television, we believe. Okay, we believe it to be true. What we read in the newspaper, you believe it to be true. Okay, and unfortunately, we're finding more and more today, and people are discovering that the truth is mixed with falsehood at all times. But it has been very deliberate, as I said earlier. It's been deliberate and intentional. Okay, to undermine the excellence and the genius of African Americans, especially. Whatever.
Absolutely.
Caucasian, they fear the African American more than any other people of color. Okay, they fear that. And I personally believe they know the greatness, they see the greatness, they have always seen the power. When you see a people who have been resilient over the years through slavery, okay, through post Jim Crow, okay, through it all, and they see the resilience of a people, the inability of the system to truly break the spirit of a people, it causes fear.
Yeah.
Okay, in the hearts and the minds of those who are considered superior. Okay, they're not, of course, we know that they're not, but it invokes fear. And that's what you see more than anything else is fear. And they have taught the world to fear them, to fear us, because we're going to do you harm. Okay. And but at the same time, it's the ambiguity is that you're going to do me harm, but at the same time, they fear our excellence, the power. Now, I believe that all people have power. Okay, some know it and some don't. Okay, but I believe the power that has sustained us is divine. I believe that is divine. But he has also given us that will, that perseverance, the determination of spirit. And I say that is a connection with the universe himself. I really believe that, you know. And to overcome the challenges, the obstacles, the biases, the continued racism, and all that we have experienced over the year, because we will rise. We will rise. We're rising now.
You are rising.
While the media portrays a negative aspect of African Americans, if you ever get out there and get involved in the organizations, you will be astonished, Lily. You will be astonished.
Absolutely.
At the brilliance and the genius of millions of African Americans in this country. Perfect example, years ago, we had the unwed mothers' homes. They were in towns all over. I'm going back to the 60s and prior to. Full of Caucasians. They were not established for African Americans. They were established for Caucasians. And the unwed mothers' homes, you can go and you'd find nothing but teenage girls who would become pregnant. They would have the babies, and the parents would give them up for adoption. They were unable to bring their babies home. Okay, they would come back to the communities, and they pretended they had visited a grandparent or a family member, you know, which was why they were gone. The schools worked with the families. And I lived around it, so I know what I'm talking about as well. You know, the Jewish girls, they would get pregnant all the time. And but it was whites in general, and that's what you had. And when you study, you can find out unwed mothers' homes. They give their children up for adoption. They get rid of them. They send them to other countries. It's what they have done historically over years. When it happened to the African American female, she held on to her child. They kept their children. Sometimes the grandparent would end up raising the child. Okay, and maybe perhaps send, if it was in the South, they would send the young lady north to a relative to start over again, and the baby would be raised in the South with the grandparent. So this is, and the same up here. If it happened in the North, they would send the baby south to be raised by a grandparent or a relative in the South, so that the individual could, you know, continue their education. It has always been different for people of color. That's all. Isn't that we're doing anything any different?
Yeah.
Okay? It's the same. The same with, I'll go with the drugs. The EEO programs that they started up within corporate America during the 60s, and I'll say the early 70s was when they really began to start the EEO programs. And those were the employee assistance programs to help you, but they were started because of addictions. And the addictions were executives. Okay?
See, it's like you would,
executives.
It's like you don't see this in the media. It's like you have this image that these people, like, oh, like they're rich, they have a lot of money, so these issues don't apply to them.
Yes.
Right, but
even
it's
our employees, what happened, because I had an employee, I mean, I had no idea she was addicted, because I just didn't understand that world. And I had no idea. She was a lovely young woman, and, you know, but I had noticed a change in her behavior. And, I knew something was going on, and so I was away on a business trip. I returned, and it was brought to my attention, people thought she was inebriated on the job. And so when I confronted her, she says, no, you know, I don't drink. And so I didn't know what was wrong. I knew I never smelled alcohol, and but something was off. And so one day she went to EEO on her own, and she asked them to contact me because they don't have to divulge the confidence. And they have a program within corporate America where they send the employees off to a rehab, normally a very nice place out somewhere west or some, and they let them go. They're out there for 30 days and they return to work. They can't lose their job for it. This has been going on for years. They do not lose their job, nothing.
Wow.
It's talked about in the company at all.
Okay.
What happens, look at our prisons that are full of African American males, specifically, some females, in prison, 5, 10 years, 15 years for marijuana. Marijuana.
I know. Is that not insane?
So it's intentional. You can see how blatant it has been for years, because I've been in corporate all my career. And this is what you see when they're caught for drugs, they have resources
Yeah.
that are readily available to them. Everything is hush hush, confidential. They take care of them. I had a boss, he was an alcoholic. I didn't know it, but he had a smell on him. And it was a strange odor. And I came to learn that it was from the alcohol. They ended up firing him because he had just gone too far for whatever reason. And he had, did some things at the company. So they had to fire him. But many of our executives who really were on the executive row, they were addicted to drugs or alcohol. Many. So, and it was pervasive throughout the country, which is why they decided, let's come up with a program. If they could do that for executives and other people in corporate America, they could do the same for people, everyday people.
Yeah.
On the street. And so it's been very different for African Americans and Hispanics. Hispanics, no different, okay? They put them in jail, incarcerated, throw away the key. But the treatment they receive while incarcerated does a job on them, does a job. By the time they get out, they are angry, emotionally distraught, okay? And they're changed people.
And then they experience a lot of discrimination after leaving prison,
When they come out of prison, there are no programs for people when they come out of prison. They have programs, but then when they get ready to go be employed,
they're on their own.
Record? No.
You mentioned
doesn't happen to Caucasians.
Yeah, and that's really sad. It's like they always have a way out, and it's like, and that perpetuates the stereotype of people of color. Is because it's not even, and I'm learning so much from this conversation, because it's not even just about it's not even just about it's not just like, oh well, because maybe this group maybe does more drugs than that group, but it's like, no, they just get away with it a lot easier.
They get away with it,
and that makes a lot more sense, because it's just like, it's really not about, this conversation has been super enlightening for me, because I lived in a middle upper class community my whole life, an all white community. And so my idea of poverty was always related to what I saw in the media, right?
Yes.
So I feel like, just honestly being honest with myself, I feel like I expected that in lower income communities with more people of color, there's just a lot more irresponsibility. Like, I honestly thought that. I was like, well, that's why there's so much drug use. That's why there's so much unplanned pregnancy. That's why there's so many different things going on. And it's like, no, you can see this in upper class communities too. You can see this, like, if the executives making a lot of money.
Always.
Doing, and doing the hard drugs.
Heroin was referred to as the rich man's high. Drugs were placed into African American communities during the 60s. That it was intentional. If you saw the movie Godfather, that was very true. Okay.
I have not seen it, but I will.
Pull it up, see it. It was very intentional to just put drugs into their communities. That's the only way to get them. Why? Because African Americans were graduating high school, they were going to colleges.
They were defying stereotypes. Exactly.
They were entering corporate America. And so they said, no, we have to come up with a way. This is what they did. So they began to just infiltrate drugs into all the communities. and although you can, when you get into corporate America, it was a different standard for the females as opposed to African American male. The female has always been treated different, better. Okay, they would promote a female 10 times faster than a male, always. They would do everything to undermine males. I worked in a department once where I was the only African American manager. There was like maybe 7 additional managers in our department. They were all Caucasian. And most of them, their subordinates were better educated, who were African Americans, were better educated. What they would do, I would walk around. It was the first time that I had a staff position, because I had always had subordinates, but I voted again and I had a staff position, which allowed me the time to walk around and converse with people in the various groups. And I would do that. And I was amazed to find out the education level of so many of them, in fact, all of them. And they would share with me how they had put in for promotions. You know, they had submitted all their paperwork and suddenly nothing happened. I began to research and investigate, and I discovered that the managers, my colleagues that I was working with, they were undermining the process. Yeah, undermining all of them. They were afraid of them because they were more intelligent. They were better, the blacks were better educated. They were afraid of them, okay? They had all come out of New York, the whites, because they had shut down some of the buildings in New York. They built Bedminster. That was AT&T, because I was 25 years in at AT&T. They built Bedminster, and to hold on to a position, they had to relocate to Jersey. They didn't move to Jersey, but they had to work in Jersey at Bedminster. And I tell you, such a group of ignorant guys, I am not kidding you. And so they had a problem with me walking around talking and spending time with, especially if I spent time with African Americans. I would tell the people I would talk to, I said, now, and what would happen, 3 of the guys would come and they would sit over on the side and attempt to intimidate me so that I would move on, not talk to their, staff. And I would tell the people that I was speaking to, I says, don't worry about them. They're trying to intimidate you. I said, and I would tell them there was a law in this country. At one time, 3 or more blacks could not congregate at any time. It was against the law in this country. I said, that's what you're dealing with. And they're trying to intimidate you. They can't intimidate me, but they're trying to intimidate you, okay? Because they don't know what you might share with me. And sure enough, I was able to gather enough information and come against those guys. Now, what was on my side, there was one Caucasian female manager. Just so happened she was married to an African American. She had 2 children. And she said, so we were talking, and she says, Diane, she says, I'm going to fight with you. She said, because my children are African American. Okay. She said, and I can see what my children will be up against,
They're going to go through.
Yes. And we collaborated. And let me tell you, through that collaboration, I was able to be heard even more because she was involved. And she was able to share all the comments that they felt comfortable saying in front of her pertaining to African Americans. She shared all of that because we would talk freely in front of her. And they would say how they were doing things to undermine the progress of the African Americans that were on their staffs. Oh yeah, it was very interesting. And all of those guys, all of them were let go. It was 4 of them. They were let go.
For that reason.
They were let go, yes.
Wow, because you guys,
they
you
all
and that
lost their
lady,
job.
Wow, because you and that lady
Right.
teamed together
We
and
collaborated.
called them out.
And she said, Diane, she said, let me take the lead. I'm white. She said, you know, they're going to listen to me even faster.
Oh, absolutely, because
She had been working with them longer as well. So and she was privy to the various conversations that were had in her presence. She was able to share all of that. Oh, yeah. And so it was really interesting. So, and those are the things that we need to do, even now. Black and white and others collaborate. The collaborative efforts of the melting pot, working
absolutely
for the benefit of the whole.
And I think I definitely agree with you because I'd say that, and this is why I've been doing a lot of collaboration work with communities that I don't identify with. So I did this kind of off topic, like I did a kind of collaboration with like the body positive movement on work towards like equality for women of larger size. And I think it's important that for the people that are in like the more I guess like not saying that they're an oppressor, but people that are of like, of like the higher end of the stick to be involved in these conversations and to stand up because it's that collaboration, it's that teamwork that can get a lot of things done. And
exactly.
I do feel at times in the media, I feel like at times the media can be very divided. I feel like sometimes the media almost is kind of pushing us in this day and age to divide like the races. So I feel that at times when, it's kind of like people like pitting like people against each other. And it's like, no, like we want to unite and address this issue as a whole. We don't want it to be, just the white people saying, Black Lives Matter and then just the Black people saying Black Lives Matter. We want everyone to come together and talk about this issue together.
I think what's necessary is the educational piece. I think the day of sitting silent and allowing a peer or relative to just get by with making racist comments, I think it should be over.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you on that.
It's an opportunity to educate.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah.
And I say educate with love, but educate for sure.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
We've got to educate people. We can't continue to give a pass on ignorance. Okay?
Totally.
We just cannot continue to do it because where we are today, we have been silent. So now what do we have? We have people who have, affluent, let's say some of the affluent people of our society, and that's just some of the successful. When I say affluent, that's all I'm speaking of because I believe in dressed up trash, okay? And that's very real. We have it in the White House. You have dressed up trash, okay? And so we've been taught that because of one's socioeconomic status, that to see them as better than. But I've been in that world my entire career. I've worked around dressed up trash for years. Okay. So trash is trash. Some is dressed up. Some is not. Some might live with one zip code and others live in another zip code that's perceived as affluent. Nonetheless, trash with lifestyles. Okay. Some can hide it better. When you look at your mass murderers and your serial killers, most come from nice homes. They come from the so-called middle class or upper echelon.
Yeah.
It has always been. So, unfortunately, again, it's education, it's teaching people to love yourself. Doesn't matter what economic status you're born into. I believe everyone should be taught self-love.
Absolutely.
Oneself. And then set boundaries in all relationships. But love yourself, okay? Because none of us have any power over parents, that we've been given,
Mhm.
the neighborhood that we're raised in, we don't have power over that. What you have power over is what you do with whatever deck you've been dealt. What do I do with this? What do I do with it? Because that's where you have the power. You can determine, where you're going in life. You can determine that. Doesn't matter where you've come from, but you can determine where you're headed. But the racist hates anyone that isn't white.
Mhm.
They really do. That's the racist.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and a lot of people, that's why people have come together now. Your Asians are coming together. They understand. Oh, they got it. They understand. And when you talk to them, they will tell you the discrimination that they experience here in this country.
Mhm.
And while many of them, they come here and they do well, they really do well. But the discrimination that they experience is unbelievable, and only they can tell that story.
Right.
I'm around a lot of them, and I have been for years, and they tell the story. And I remember the first time I heard it, I was stunned, okay? Because I said, you guys come, you get best education. When you go to the high school graduations, you're at the top of the class, and I see it everywhere in the white community. I see it's the Asian kids who are at the top anymore. Yeah. Okay, they really are. And they can live in the most affluent neighborhoods because, they're smart with money, they're very frugal. And they said, and yet they're discriminated against and they hate it, you see. So they have been coming together more and more and more. I'm NAACP, as you know, and I have been since 1981. I've been actively involved in NAACP. And what I have seen since Trump has come into office, more and more Asians have become members of NAACP.
Interesting.
Now, it has always been a Black and white organization.
Yeah.
Although so many people don't know that. It was founded by Blacks and whites. More whites than Black.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So two Russians, Jews at that, American Jews, and a couple of Blacks. Yeah.
See, the beauty of coming together
Who
really
founded NAACP. Yeah.
Wow, I actually really didn't know that. I imagined that it would just be founded by Black people, but
Not at all. Not at
really
all.
interesting.
Because we're only here to help make the world a better place.
Mhm. Yeah.
We're here to impact the lives of others in a positive way. That's the only reason any of us are here.
That's such a beautiful thing because I feel like that's a beautiful thing to say because it's like, yeah, we're here. I know kind of in a capitalistic mindset, it's like we're here to contribute to the economy
Exactly.
and it's just like, but no, like we should be here to make the world a better place.
The world a better place. That's what it's all about.
And so when people want to
nature,
right,
to take care of the environment.
Yeah, so when people want to be mean or, people want to be judgmental or they want to be, hate on other people, it's like you're not making the world a better place by a comment that you're about to make.
Not at all.
You're not making the world a better place by judging people for how they look.
I believe that we should be sensitive to all cultures in terms of using words that are offensive.
Mm-hmm.
The culture. It would be like me calling the Jew a kike. You know what I'm saying? Or an Italian a guinea. Or their words. Nigger stands out because of slavery. Mm-hmm. Nigger stands out because of the racism, the pervasive racism that consistently goes on in every fabric of our society. That's why that word nigger stands out, and it's associated with slavery. Mm-hmm. That's really why it stands out more. It's associated with slavery. Mm-hmm. Okay? A derogatory term that was used to describe a group of people, nigger. So it's why it's more offensive than some of the other derogatory terms that were created to describe other ethnic groups of people. You know, with Spanish, the equivalent to nigger is spick. Okay, that's an insult to call someone, oh, that's spick. That's what they used to do. Okay, you know, a Jew, oh, that kike. That's very offensive to a Jewish person. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. These are offensive and derogatory words that have been created to offend groups of people. But because of slavery, the history of slavery in this nation, of Jim Crow, and the consistent and pervasive racist cultures in this country, nigger stands out above them all.
Yeah.
And so, no, I wouldn't give anyone license to call, or it wouldn't be okay for someone to call me that, but I'm not going to get totally offended. Years ago, I would, but I'm at a different place now. That's
where you're like, it says more about them than it says about
says
you.
More, exactly, it says more about them. When Blacks use it towards one another, I have a problem, because they began using it, okay, in music and in rap and what have you, towards one another. Again, ignorant people who have not studied history, have no understanding of the correlation between that word and slavery, okay, and how offensive it is. They were using it in art. It became an art form, part of the art form.
Right, like they're reclaiming the word.
Reclaiming the word, but in a different way. Exactly. Yeah. The intent is different. But I don't think it's a word they should use. But
okay, you don't prefer it, but like you
I don't prefer it. Yeah, I don't prefer it at all. And I think until we get to the place where we respect ourselves, and I'm just saying those who use it, because they're in the minority. Use it. They are in the minority. And but we need to help them. We need to help to educate them. And so now, as you see, many are not using it any longer.
Yeah.
They're not. Why? Because they've been educated. And so it's a matter of educating, but it's a slave term. It's how we were described. It's how they didn't use your name. They just called you nigger. So it's associated with a very dark time in American history. Yeah.
Absolutely. And of course now people are like, you know, obviously it's a different time now. I mean, of course it still gets used to racially offend people, yes. But you know, we're definitely at a better place with that. And just to kind of transition, I remember at our last, the first time I met you, you told me what, because I don't want to take, I know this is like a really long interview, so I just want to get this one last story in from you, because I thought it was super interesting. When you were talking about hiring 2 Black women, and your thought process behind that, even though their resume wasn't as up to par as some of their white counterparts, you still hired them anyways. Do you mind explaining your reasoning for that? And I think that could maybe explain, for example, the reason that affirmative action exists to begin with.
I had 2 openings, and I interviewed quite a few people. Most of them were all Caucasians, of course, with the exception of 2. And but as I looked at the records, and I looked at the 2 African-American women, one was a college graduate. I could see she had just been passed over at the company for a number of years, did not move. Okay. The other one had been with the company about 11 years as well. They had promoted her, but never into management, you know. And I looked at that, and they qualified. They qualified for the position. So in no way was the resume inferior to the others. Okay. But they had just been overlooked because they were African American. And I really thought about it. I really thought about it. I prayed about that thing. I did. Because the distaste in my mouth for what had happened to them. And they didn't tell me this. I didn't share it with them at all. I knew what I was looking at when I looked at their credentials, their records. I knew what I was looking at.
Because you also experienced it yourself, right?
Yeah. I've been very fortunate.
Yeah.
My career has been out of this world. I experienced it at Prudential Insurance Company and public service, yes, because it was so racist. By the time I went to AT&T, while they're still racist, I don't know, I was in the right place at the right time. I personally believe that God, the divine, was all over me and in me, and it didn't matter what I did. Doors were just going to open for me everywhere, because you just know when the universe is, when you're aligned, you just know. That's all I can tell you. But anyway, I hired the 2 African-American women. And about 3 months later, I was in a meeting in Piscataway. I ran into a woman that I had not seen in years. And she said, Diane, it's amazing running into you. You were a topic of discussion just a week ago with some people. And she shared with me that I was getting ready to be, there was a suit coming my way. There was a woman who I had interviewed for the position who thought that she should have been hired for the position. Mm-hmm. And so she filed a suit against me, discrimination suit. Yeah. Once she learned that I had hired African Americans. Now, they didn't work in my city even. Okay. One did. The other 2, none of the others worked in the city I was in. Okay. And so I was grateful for the heads up. So I went to my boss immediately, and I wanted to let him know so that he wouldn't be caught off. And when I went to him, he was intimidated and very upset by it. And he said, Diane, what did you do? I said, Lou, I can justify my hiring. And there was like a point system, and there was a criteria. And so I was able to I did the paperwork to justify why I had hired them. And he was very nervous and upset by it. He was a Caucasian man, but we had an excellent relationship. He was very disturbed by it. I said, Lou, I will advocate for me. I don't need you to advocate for me, because I knew he couldn't. I knew he would cave in, under pressure. I said, I can advocate for myself. I said, no one could better advocate for me than me, which I did, When it finally came to us and we had to go to those arbitration meetings, I went and I was able to state my case. And I won. So I thought, a while later, I discovered that the woman who had filed the suit, AT&T, they paid her.
They paid her to?
A monetary settlement. Now that wasn't discussed at all. They didn't bring it to my attention at all. It was a few months later when I learned that. I was shocked and angry. I was angry because I was able to justify why I hired these 2 women.
Mm-hmm. And it's like she still wasn't having it.
No, they wanted to pay her anyway, to give her something anyway. That would have never happened had the situation been reversed.
Yeah.
The problem was I had the gall as a Black woman to hire 2 Blacks. Mm-hmm. People did not hire Black people. While we would get promotions, what I discovered, Blacks would only hire whites. They were afraid to hire their own people. And I was a part of the African American Association at AT&T, within AT&T. And I remember asking my buddies, we get together from time to time. And I said, you guys are always talking Black power, you're always talking Black, Black, Black. But I noticed not one of you have anyone Black working for you, not one of you. And they worked in different locations as well. I said, none of you. I said, but you're always talking Black. You see the racism, and we're here for a reason. Not to perpetuate racism in the reverse, because that's not what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't be afraid to hire our own.
Right.
To support our own and to promote them.
Right.
To move them on, to make doors open for them. We can't be afraid. And what I learned during those years, the average African American who had, reached any kind of height, they did not hire their own people who looked like them.
Wow. And I think it's also.
And if one did, I did have one friend, she had one African American woman working for her eventually. And the way she would even speak of her was always in the negative. And I had to tell her about that. I said, that's the bourgeois mentality. I've arrived and we don't know to reach back and pull.
Right.
And my thing was that I worked around so many ignorant Caucasians who were there because of their father, their mother, their uncle, their siblings. It was always who knew who. It wasn't what you knew, it was who you knew. That's how the doors open for white people today in our law enforcement. Okay? I was on a call just yesterday with, we were discussing policing issues, salvation and social justice, and we're working on the policing issues in New Jersey right now, but it's around the nation, and how to reform and what needs to happen, okay? And a perfect example, I was telling them, I said, over the last 2-3 years, they've been recruiting, trying to recruit minorities into law enforcement. And so police officers been going all around trying to recruit, get more minorities on. And so what one woman said, she was white, she was on the call yesterday, and she said, well, what they were told is the reason they don't have them is because they can't pass the test. African Americans can't pass the test. I said, well, that's not true. What happens is that when a white guy and the African American, are up for trying to get on the force, what will happen? The black guy has a marijuana conviction on this side, and a white guy has one. The white guy will get in anyway, where the black won't. If
not a level playing field.
Any sort of misdemeanor, exactly, any kind of misdemeanor, those white officers go to bat for the whites that come on. All who they're bringing, they go to bat and they fight for them and get them in. The blacks don't do the same.
Yeah.
The guy, has the slightest little mark on his record. They don't.
Yeah, and then
they don't do it. So, and it's the same example you have. They're not up in arms as they should be with their white counterparts who are slaughtering our people.
Yeah.
They're quiet.
They always get a pass.
Exactly.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for answering so many of my questions today. This really was such an important conversation because it really and I'm hoping that my viewers can learn a few things about just learning how to put your biases aside. And even if something may maybe an event happened that may fulfill your stereotype, like encourage your stereotype, you gotta isolate, you gotta not do that, because you gotta remember, as you were talking about, you'd be surprised. It's not just this community issue. It's like the Black community, the issue is just highlighted a lot more, but it totally happens everywhere else.
Everywhere.
So I thank you for thank you for clarifying that, and I thank you for just sharing and defending and I thank you for all of your work in uplifting your community and hiring people of color. And I think that this conversation, I think in corporate America, I feel like I hope it's definitely gotten better, because we don't want this to be the norm anymore. And I just thank you. You're incredible and super inspiring. And
I thank you very much for the opportunity. I really do. You give me hope for our future, because it's young people like you who are very curious, who are determined to be a positive impact on the world that will make all the difference. And I truly believe that one day, this will be America that is free from the systemic racist systems that exist, that white supremacy will be no more. I really believe that because there are so many young people just like yourself that are saying, not on my watch, not on.
Yes.
So again, I thank you. It has been an honor. It has been a privilege to have been invited for this interview.
Thank you so much. And
Thank you. I wish you all the best. And I just encourage you to continue to walk in your authenticity because you have power. You have great power. Authenticity is power because so few people dare to embrace their authentic spirit and be who they are purposed to be. So thank you for being you. Thank you.
Thank you.